Imagine, if you will, on any given night, a Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, come home from work, you're stressed out, getting ready to go on a date night, and your partner just gets irritable. You don't know why, you don't know what's going on. You ask them if they're okay, they say, I'm fine, but you know they're not fine. Something's happening, and you don't know what, and little do you even know that they may have experienced a traumatic experience in their life of some sort, and they're into that experience, and they're distant from you, and you're struggling. This is what is experienced by many men and women who have loved ones in their lives that have an experience with trauma. And that's what we're going to talk about today, Mr. Graves. Hello, I'm Chris Gazdick, and he is Mr. Craig Graves. I'm a mental health and substance abuse therapist. I have a book available soon, Re-Experiencing Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. Craig is an unbeatable mind coach. He has his website, wininyourmind.com. Check it out, and he might be willing to coach through life with you. Welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast. See the world through the lens of a therapist and a coach. Being aware is not delivery of therapy services in any way. Checking out our website, throughatherapist'seyes.com, where you get full show transcriptions. Any book that we have that we've talked about on the show is available there. Click through the site. We get a little bit of a stipend help with that. We also are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can get online therapy counseling. You'll find us on Spotify, iTunes, and all kinds of places that you find your podcast. Mr. Graves, this is the human emotional experience. Let's figure this thing out together. Spouses and loved ones with trauma. What says you, Mr. Graves? How do we deal with that?
Man, I'm here just like everybody else, trying to figure it out. Trying to see what you tell us.
All right. Let's start out with what I do in a therapy office anytime that I kind of get a trauma experience. And I think that you can replicate that in ways where you're dealing with a loved one or even just a buddy or a friend or somebody that you know has had trauma. There's some certain things that anytime I come across trauma, I like to lay out right from the get-go. Boom. Like, you got to know these things in order to work with me so that we're on the same page on how this works, right? So the first thing above all, safety above all other concerns. Okay, I learned this from a conference that I was at, really green, young clinician, and I remember a guy standing up in front of the room in therapy experience, and he said, you know what, one of the things I've learned throughout my experience doing therapy, he was well-seasoned therapist, did trainings around the state, pretty well-known guy, and he said safety above all else. And I'll tell you what, I have gone back to that over and over again and found so many different applications to that. We're not just talking about homicidality or suicidality. We're talking about emotional safety, physical safety, and certainly safety from, suicidal thoughts and such. So that's got to come first, safety above all else. Secondly, we got to deal with current emotions and be able to be in a manageable state, right? So we don't even begin talking about the quote-unquote new material of trauma when someone reveals that to me until we kind of talk about self-care, take a good assessment, get some skills and stuff in place to kind of know that you can manage the stress that you currently got that's all sort of happening now in the real here and now, right? Those are two very important steps. We don't even go any further with any kind of trauma stuff. Those are almost a requirement, okay? Third, you need to be in control. I make sure you understand you control what we talk about. Fourth, you control the depth of what you reveal. Fifth, you control the pace. That person needs to know that they are not going to be forced, pushed, pressured in any way to do anything or talk about anything that they're not comfortable with. They're totally in control. Fifth, it's a no judgment zone, right? I like to set up the idea that, they need to know that they can say, and it's a hard standard to get to, but that they can say anything that they may need to say, and this environment becomes a safe environment for somebody to be able to do so. That's the goal, and that's hard to get to. But we try to do some de-escalation, some disarming, stuff. I like to use humor. If you're in therapy with me, Craig, you're probably going to laugh at some point, right? So you need to know that there's no judgment. Special note here for private conversations, though. Instilling the very difficult notion that you could say anything that might need to be said. This is very, very hard. Right?
Say that again.
In order to get to a place where you convey to your spouse, you convey to your buddy that, you could say anything that you might need to say, anything that's needed, anything at all. That is a very, very, very hard thing to establish. because this is going to be used against me. You're going to remember this. You're going to bring it up later on. It's going to be weaponized, you know. And so it's easy in a therapy environment. I have an extra easy advantage because in a therapy environment, that's totally easy to believe that that's the case. That's why therapy works, right? When you're doing that with your spouse, you got a tough one on this. What is this? Number 5, no judgment zone, right? Number 6, I make sure that the person understands and knows that I can handle the details, okay? There's a natural inclination to believe if you hear what I did in theater, in a military engagement, or if you really know what happened on my job today, that you're not really going to be able to handle it. I got to make sure that they understand that I can handle the details. They need to know that whatever they tell you, you know, it's not going to do harm to you. Like people feel protective, you know, towards their loved one or their buddy. They don't want to do extra harm. Okay. And again, I can say that they can tell me, you know, they can't tell me anything really much new. I can reassure them, you know, I've been doing this long enough. I could tell them to say, you know, you're not going to surprise me with much. And that's hard to do in a private conversation or a personal relationship. Lastly, that our relationship won't change. You know, and I learned this actually from Jeff Shook, our guy. He's a good colleague of mine. Yeah, I know you know him. You've mentioned it before, right? There's a natural, particularly with sexual abuse cases and situations and whatnot, right? Like, you need to know and understand that my role in this is nothing more than a therapist. That's all I am. It's all I ever will be, and our relationship will never change. In a private conversation, you really want to kind of reinforce the idea that no matter what you tell me, we're going to be together. I'm committed here, and I reassure you, and we're not going to suffer any dramatic changes in our relationship. Is the way that you amend that. So that's what I do with my therapy rules, and I threw in there a couple of little perks for spouses. You can kind of adopt this and go with this, and it's a good way to kind of start laying out some things when you find out your spouse or your loved one, you know, has some sort of trauma experience.
So these are rules that you have adopted for your office, for your sessions.
Correct.
Okay. What was the source of these? Where'd you get these?
I think just kind of me and my travels.
Just over time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like a blog post, doesn't it?
It could be. Yeah, it does. It could be. So you're saying that you're throwing these out just for other therapists or for
throwing these therapy rules out as what I do in my office when I'm dealing with trauma.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is you might be able to adopt this, you know, with your loved one, given a special couple circumstances I just mentioned. But these are good things to have in place in dealing with trauma.
Okay, so you're saying if you're going to have a conversation with your spouse about this issue, these might be some rules you'll adopt.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety above all else. Current emotion needs to be able to be manageable first. The loved one is in complete control. They control the depth. They control the pace. God bless you, man. He just sneezed if you didn't hear that off mic.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Excuse me.
He's got the COVID. No, I'm just
You better hope not.
I'm just kidding. No judgment. You can manage the details and reinforcing that things will not change. All right, those are some rules and good things to adopt. And you're young therapists out there listening, absolutely, or if you're a coach, honestly, you know, those are really good things to kind of really put in place, so that you can create this environment. You can create an opportunity for this person. On the last show, we talked about, you know, what do we say? Tell your story, right? Don't be alone. And then you can actually re-understand. You said recapitulate. You can redefine your story. Well, you can't even begin that if you don't have some things kind of put in place to where you're going to have some, you know, some emotional peace and confidence in that process. So that's a good way to start, man.
Interesting. I'm gonna give you a show note suggestion. So you're saying 1, 2, 3. I'm like, where the heck is he? Because on the notes it's A, B, C.
Yeah, we do math, man. F is 5.
1, 2, 3. I'm like really confused.
E is 5. I'm sorry. Yeah, show no change. All right, I'm sure the listening audience cares about that. My brainstorm of factors. Okay, let's kick down through some of what we want to try to do, you know, and some of the factors, because as I laid out there in the beginning of the show, I mean, you can imagine this is really an important and unique perspective in the life of a family, especially. Because one of the things that's so torturous, you know, military homes, military families. We talked a lot about military last time. I guess the title I said, especially sexual trauma. I was thinking that maybe I'll kind of spin around with different kind of traumas this episode to broaden it out. But you know, the family impact is severe, right? The family and the relationships that first responders, people with trauma, domestic violence, whatever it might be, military families struggle with relationships and communication. Now we think of it as the kid's got to move from town to town to town, and that's what military family means. Well, military family also means, communication is rough. The divorce rates are high. The suicide rates are high. The depression and mood disorders are high. Trauma is high. And that's why, I'm recovered now, Mr. Graves, but you got me last show where you said, look, this has been 20 years since Iraq started, and it's been a long time since we really got geeked into this with Vietnam War. And we could do better because the effects are dramatic. And so this show is a little bit of a different angle on, loved ones and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, as a therapist, I'll tell you what I got to do. I got to decompress. I got to manage myself. When you're dealing with trauma, you hear some things sometimes that's hard to hear. You experience some things that's hard to experience when you're walking with people. And if you don't have the ability to handle your own emotions, well, that's going to be a hard day. It really is. And so, not that I'm an expert on handling my own emotions. I've admitted that on the show before. At times I really suck at it. But, doing the work that I do, you do pick up a lot of different angles that you might not think otherwise. And so if you have a spouse, you have a loved one that's dealing with trauma and whatnot, man, you've really got to be mindful about managing your own emotion. How good do you think people generally are at that, we've established?
Yeah, not very good.
We suck at it. We suck at it. So, what you didn't know will affect you. It's important to manage yourself so that you can be facilitated and manage your own emotion. This has likely been going on for a while for this person, and you've not known it. This has likely been going on for the entire time that you may even have known them. You know how many people get married and they never reveal to their spouse that they've had sexual trauma?
I don't have any idea.
A lot. Yeah, I ain't going to tell anybody. Well, I'm going to tell you. What are you different? Yeah, we're getting married, but you don't even know that. I can't tell anybody that.
That's a big deal, though.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah. And if you have shared that with your spouse, good for you. That's a great first step. That's if that's the only person you've shared that with, okay. Let's try to broaden that a little bit, but that's a great first step. But a lot of times people don't even share it with your spouse. I mean, a lot of things, you know, the expression, right? What kind of skeletons you got in your closet, Mr. Graves? You gonna let anybody know that?
No, I ain't got no skeletons, man.
He didn't even say that with a straight face, audience. We need to start doing this on YouTube.
That brings up a question for me, though, is like, we're talking about pretty big issues here. I mean, definitely trauma. It's easy to say, yeah, that was traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you have small little traumas throughout your life? How do you go back and identify those things? My father slapped me, or
Stood up.
you do what?
I was stood up on a date.
Yeah, stood up on a date. Just stuff like that. I mean, how do those kind of things show up later in life?
They do, and it's an excellent question. And to a lesser degree, you're not going to have post-traumatic stress disorder. You might not even have acute stress disorder. That's PTSD light, if you will. But you've got these different experiences that you haven't really explored or thought about. I mean, maybe you've been embarrassed and you haven't really wanted to dang gum tell anybody. It starts by being able to take the courage, which takes an incredible amount of courage to break the seal, and let somebody know what you've dealt with.
How do you? I hear stories about people who block stuff out completely.
Yeah.
And then they discover it later on.
Yeah, repression.
Yeah. So how does that happen? And once you've discovered it, how do you really know that it really happened?
That is an awesome question and thought, and almost psychologically fascinating to me. The way that I've made sense out of that, Craig, is the fact of the matter is Mother Nature kind of kicks in. When something is too hard or difficult or weird for you to handle, boom, Mother Nature kicks in and you don't even remember it happened. Like, wow, right? And it's a good question, because sometimes what will happen with those situations is you kind of get body memories start happening. Like your body remembers what happened. Stephanie Fast, in her dramatic story early on in the history of our show, shared some things with her that she talked about. What was her expression? What the mind forgets, the body remembers. Something like that.
I don't remember her saying that, but I'll take your word for it.
Right. Because you remember that feeling of hunger. You know, and I remember telling her I wanted to follow her around with a hamburger because she said when she's busy talking and running around and she forgets to eat, suddenly she'll feel that hunger pain. And she didn't associate it with trauma at first, if I remember correctly, but then she began to realize and associate that because the body remembered. And she would be that little girl in Korea again, roaming the countryside, starving. But she didn't really connect that. So, you know, it can affect you in ways that you're really not aware of. And if you pay attention, you get mindful, you start paying attention. I'll tell you what I think is really important as well. When you pay attention in combination with managing your emotions well as you grow, then Mother Nature kind of realizes, oh, okay. I think you can handle it and you can remember now. And people will begin recovering their memories. You know, I don't do hypnosis therapy. I don't really engage in that. And that's a great way to go. It's a great service. But I kind of have the belief that you don't need to go into a hypnotic state to recover memories and whatnot. Mother Nature will kick in when you're managing emotion well to allow that.
So have you had that experience in your office? People remembering things that they had suppressed?
Oh, absolutely.
Repressed, suppressed? What's the right term?
Both.
Okay.
Both. Repression is a term where you just don't have memory. You have no recall.
Yeah.
Suppression is kind of, you compartmentalize it. You push it down. You push it away. You resist it from coming to the surface.
So you've had people say, oh, wow, God, I just remembered this.
Absolutely.
And I was 12.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. And oftentimes I might have started therapy for a totally different presenting problem.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And they begin to get weller. That's a word.
Weller. Better.
They begin to get weller. They begin to, to grow a little bit. And like I said, they begin to remember, and then you can deal with it. What's so bad is when you don't. Oh, and I tell you, this just occurs to me. This isn't on the show notes or planned, but it is so dangerous within the head of a person to minimize it. I'll hear all the time, oh, well, that happened so long ago, that doesn't bother me anymore. And they're kind of really numbed out and detached from the emotion with it, and they minimize it themselves. Boy, one of the things you don't want to do as a spouse or a loved one is in any way, either intentionally or unintentionally, minimize what the experience is when somebody begins talking about this stuff. It's easy to do, particularly when you're just hanging out with them and you know them well. And you're like, oh, you're just stupid about that. Just eat that hamburger. Stop it. Meanwhile, that hamburger is reminding them of when they were in trauma in Korea starving. So you really want to be careful about that, that kind of thing. But be careful about that in your own head too. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yep. Little bonus there. So here's another big area. When you're a loved one and you're dealing with things, man, it is very natural to see the behavior that your loved one has. They're seeing that glimmer of a light in downtown Charlotte, and they're edgy and they start getting irritable. Well, unbeknownst to you, they're triggering out on a sniper, zone. And they're reliving, a desert town that they stumbled upon and re-seeing this scene. And then you're sitting there and they're like, they're tripping out. They just shut down. What the hell? I mean, they're pissed off. They're mad at me. They don't want to talk to me. Something's going on where they, maybe they're,
It's not about you.
Not about you, yeah.
It's about them.
About them. So, in general, it's good to avoid personalizing things until you know it is about you. And sometimes it is, by the way. But a lot of times it isn't, and it's very easy to take things personally and to get into that when you're observing things. And a lot of times you don't even know what you're really looking at, because they're not telling you. But you'll likely begin to understand better a lot of the things that you have been personalizing for quite a while, actually not having anything to do with you when you begin to talk about the trauma experiences. It's hard. For instance, with the sexual, trauma that people will go through, you'll have a lot of times, anybody who does marriage counseling or sex counseling or whatever, sexual appetites and sexual behavior will be there or sexual shutdown or avoidance. I mean, there are people that have sexual traumas that are having sex with their spouse, and then holy cow, they start weeping, like in the middle of, what do they call it? Playing the piano.
I never heard that term.
You never heard playing the piano?
No. So, are you a sex therapist as well?
I don't advertise as that, but I mean, sex comes up a lot in therapy. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I have a sex therapist that I'm trying to get on the show as a guest. So we'll see
Yeah.
if that works out.
Yeah,
But,
that would be great because
Yeah.
there's a specified kind of thing. It's a lot of relationship treatment,
yeah.
But this is hard because you're engaged in a relationship with a spouse, and they suddenly start weeping and stuff. It's like, they might get angry or over the years and even have like startle reactions. I mean, I've had sexual trauma victims, and I mean, they're in the middle of a panic attack in the middle of sex, and the partner's like, "Dude, what's wrong with me? What? I did something wrong?" And again, you can't take that personally, but you got to know what's going on. You want to check out, like, whoa, what happened there? You don't seem like you feel safe. Like, what's happening? And you get in there in a validating way, and you begin trying to figure out, holy cow, are we dealing with PTSD? I didn't know. I can't tell you how many people are dealing with full-blown PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have no idea that that's why they're freaking out right now. They've not put it together because that's just their experience. And so, being able to put it together, and deal with things, go back to the trauma rules, and you're well on your way to recovery. Okay. So you want to facilitate your own emotions, and you want to be careful about personalizing the behavior. And I'll tell you what, when you come across something that's new to you and you don't know much about, and you need to because your spouse is dealing with this, what do you think you might want to learn about?
What's going on with them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Google in tow. Get a book, read, learn, become a little mini expert in what's going on, in understanding trauma in any way possible. Get on, read blogs, listen to the show, get some understanding of what you're dealing with, because man, this is something this person has been dealing with intently, for a while. Here's another one. D. Or should I say number 4, Mr. Graves?
Whatever it is.
Respect what? Letter D there. Respect.
Their privacy.
Yeah. Right. Well, wait a minute. I'm your spouse. You're supposed to tell me everything, right? Well, if you can't tell me, then who, what are you telling somebody else? You telling some other girl you're dating? You telling some other guy at work, There's a very weird reality that when you're living with somebody, you kind of want to know what they're dealing with and what they're doing and what they've done today and what they did yesterday and what all their experiences are. Well, be careful there. Hold on. Trauma rule number, what was it here? Number 5 or 6, right? Who's in control?
Yeah, they are.
They need to be in control, and and you need to be able to respect their privacy when they're not wanting to talk, when they're not wanting to, to deal with it. Now, there's a balance there because we can't never deal with it. You don't want to fall into that trap, but you got to respect the distance and the privacy and the walls a little bit, and let them, manage that on their time frame, on their depth level, on their pace, in their way. And that's hard to do when you care so much, particularly for those of us on the tribe of abandonment, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Can you imagine how that would work?
Yeah. That could be an issue for that crowd.
Our crowd.
Yeah.
All right. So it goes along with that, but, you're trying to be the safe confidant, but, allowing them the space to take care of themselves. Listen, some of the things you have to realize, and maybe you don't realize it if you're the victim of trauma yourself. If you experienced this when you were a 20-year-old kid, in the desert of Afghanistan, or as a teenager with your uncle in sexual trauma, or, whatever, and you're 42 years old now and you're struggling with some things and trying to cope. Do you realize that you have been able to cope with this trauma for over 40 years? 30, 35 years? They've been dealing with it. It's been in them. They've been aware of it if it's not fully repressed. So respect and understand that they need to have the space to take care of themselves. They're very adept at managing their emotion. Not maybe in the most productive ways, because we talked about last time, trauma doesn't get better until you begin to address it and heal from it. But they can carry it. They've carried it for a long time. They've likely been doing this for their entire adult life. So you want to avoid jumping in and saying, okay, I got this. I'm going to take care of this now. I know now, and now I got the answers. No, you don't. And we got to be careful of that whole codependence thing, here. So I know that you got this trauma. Oh, well, you're an injured person, and I need to fix you. No, you don't. These are traps that people can fall into. These are stuck points that people can be into. Letter F, Mr. Graves. What is that? A, B, D, T, E, F, G. 6. Sorry, I can't let go of the whole show note amendment thing. Be supportive. Lots here and can be simple to think about, but on a deeper level, examine, what does it mean to be supportive? How can you do that? Okay. Knowing the love language, some cool material out there. The love language book, Gary Chapman wrote on it. If you want to be supportive, you got to do it in the way that they can manage it, the way that they can receive that care, the way that they can receive that support. Again, it isn't about you, it's about them. And if you're not really a gift-giving kind of love language person, well, you got to figure out how to do that. It's a caring thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do, but particularly when you're dealing with trauma, somebody's going to need a little bit of love, care, and support. If they need space and they need to be alone, then you got to shut it down on your part and let them be alone. How do they operate? You get into their sphere, figure out what their needs are, even if they're not telling you. How can you manage it from that perspective? Or if you're from the engulfment camp and, you're kind of stuck into the idea that, I'm sure they don't want to talk about this. They want to be alone. No. If they're in the abandonment camp and the abandonment person's been traumatized, then you need to be close to them and stay close and be close. A lot more than is comfortable for you. How hard do you think that is?
It can be tough.
Yeah.
It can be tough.
Reinforce. We are okay here. Be calm. I'm okay. We're okay. Particularly, one of the worst things to do when somebody's in a trauma situation and they're re-experiencing an event and they're flashing back? Well, tell me what's going on. Talk about it. No, talk about it now. Come at me. Go, push. Dude, that is the worst thing to do. That can escalate somebody to a dangerous level, right? It's instead, what do you need now? Just tell me what you need. Tell what can I do? What can be helpful now, right? You got to ask and be prepared. By the way, they might not even have any blazing idea. They might not have a clue. Am I blowing your head off? Am I going too fast?
No, I'm following you, man.
Cite current safety. Okay. There's a lot to this. I think I probably could spend a lot more time on this. Instead, I'm going to refer actually to a panic attack reaction. I got so much feedback on our show, Craig, about when you did that short with the panic attack. Remember when we did a show on that? And
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and you made a short out of it.
Yeah, I remember.
That is an awesome reaction when somebody is feeling panicky and in the middle of, reliving this stuff and whatnot. A lot of what goes on with that is safety statements. Deep breathing, use your senses, 5 things you see, 5 things you hear, 5 things you feel, and then safety statements. I am okay. You are okay. You're here with me. Come back in the room. That's kind of gets dicey because you're freaking out. Your adrenaline kicks up. Can you imagine if somebody starts weeping and having a panic attack in the middle of playing the piano? Are you going to be calm? No, you're going to be like, wow, what happened? So get calm, come back in the room, reinforce, you're safe, we're okay, we're going to be okay. What is letter H, Mr. Graves? I think that you might be able to speak to that one, right?
Support professional help. Reinforce the idea that it's okay to reach out. They may be highly, I don't know what that word is, but to do so.
Are people going to want to talk about this? Are people going to deal with this?
They probably are not going to want to. And I think a lot of the tips you're giving here are how to communicate with your partner, your spouse, whatever, But shouldn't that be a step that's higher up? Maybe. I mean, if you've had a traumatic experience, you probably need to have some help, right?
Probably so. Good feedback. And these aren't in any order. This is a brainstorm that I did, but yeah, I think that, that might be a bit, I don't know. On second thought, I was going to say that might be a bit of a starting spot, but things happen much more natural than that. And to be honest with you, I don't know that needs to be a first step or a second or even a third, right? Like, it's going to come out as it comes out. And I think if you just jump to that real quick, the other person's going to be like, oh, okay, you don't even want to talk to me about it. Fine, I'll shut it down. Never mind. Yeah, I'll go see a professional. Hell no, I ain't going to see a professional. I don't need no professional help. I've been dealing with this for 30 years. So, I think that you got to be kind of careful about that. You might make it a light suggestion.
I'm following what you're saying. Yeah, but I think it eventually needs to happen, right? I mean,
here's a therapist saying people can get well other ways. I mean, you might.
Can people get well through something like if it's a traumatic sexual experience or a traumatic drama just by talking to their spouse?
Boy, it's a trick question. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say yeah. I'm totally agreeing with you. I'm just playing a little devil's advocate. People can cope. People can deal with things. It's a lot to ask of your spouse to know what to do and how to handle all of this. So yeah, for sure, like professionals are there to do that and to guide that process. It'd be great to get into marriage counseling, at some point during your treatment from trauma. It's almost could be a foregone conclusion to a certain extent. So I'm not down playing that. I just don't want people to jump to that and say, all right, hey, you're sick, you're a problem. You're the problem with our marriage. Go get help.
That's not where I'm going at all. And I think you've given a lot of stuff to lead up to that point that would be supportive.
Keep on clicking my microphone with the glass. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. but I think you've given a lot of stuff to leads up to that step.
Right.
That is very supportive.
Right.
You're talking about love languages and respecting privacy and setting up a safe environment and all those steps. I think all that's great. I'm just thinking that maybe eventually you need to reach out and get somebody that really knows how to handle these kind of trauma issues.
Absolutely.
To dig deep down in there and figure out how to get out of that.
It's kind of, again, with the trauma rules. I mean, it's their own pace. I think if you force them or you push them or pressure them, I'm just thinking of a spouse that's going to be pushing that.
Yeah.
Out of their own panic.
That's not what I'm saying either.
I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. Go to the professional. Go to talk to your counselor.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying at all.
It's got to be careful.
Yeah, you know me better than that. I'm not saying that at all.
Here's a thought that happened in my brainstorm. People are afraid to do, Craig. They're really literally afraid because they don't want to do any more harm. They don't want to push. Actually, they don't want to push somebody to talk. They don't want to, trigger more problems than what already are, and so they will not ask directly questions. It's okay to ask questions in a soft way, in a validating and supportive way. Have you ever felt like ending your life? You're telling me these things. Have you ever felt that way? Just a direct question. And you'd be surprised when I do that in therapy. People like, oh, okay, I've never been asked. I don't know what to do with that. I'll answer the question directly. Yeah, I kind of have. If you're just short, simple, and ask the direct questions, then they're going to be willing more times than you would bet that, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to answer it directly and be blunt and be honest and be direct back because you were courageous enough to ask me that question directly. Right? Now, this also being said, if you're dealing with the suicide thoughts and you don't know what to do and there's a death wish that somebody might have or reoccurring intrusive thoughts about self-harm, that's not something to mess around with. You can go to the emergency room right now, right? And don't be afraid of that, because we definitely, as you start talking and you can relive and it can be hard and you can be in a moment, that can happen. So again, trauma rule number 1, you remember what it was? Safety.
Yeah.
Right.
I was getting ready to cheat, but I remember you said it.
Safety above all else. If you come across suicidality, that's when you definitely, do not collect 200, do not pass go, just go directly to the emergency room or hospital, get help. Here's an interesting one for all of us abandonment people. far as respect space and privacy. How about tolerate silence?
That's a good one.
Right? That's hard sometimes. I want to talk. Tell me. Let me ask more questions. Sometimes you really just need to tone it back, tone it down, pull it in, and just sit. Like it's okay to just sit. Sit in silence.
Yeah, I agree. Remember that scene in Pulp Fiction?
No.
The uncomfortable silence?
Oh, really?
Yeah, where she says to him, you found somebody special when you can just shut the F up and enjoy silence.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Some people struggle with it. Check in after the time frame begins to feel too long or awkward, though, right? So, hold in there, stay in there, be silent. But if it begins to be awkward, the person might get stuck. Sometimes that's 5 seconds, sometimes that's 10 seconds, sometimes that's, a couple minutes. But then, you kind of know each other. You check in and it's okay to break silence and just kind of go for a little while until it gets awkward, and then you kind of, make some comments. Rest after a conversation. Remember the 3 cares: self-care, physical care, and relationship care.
Yeah.
Right? After you have conversation, you take a big bite out of the elephant, go on a date. Go do something relaxing. Go watch a game together. Go watch a movie together. Decompress. It's really important to go have fun. This person's been crying and they've been upset and you've talked and you've kind of validated support. You might look at them and say, hey, man, you want to go play Scrabble? Person be like, yeah, you go get a Scrabble game and start getting into it and boom, now you're just chilling. So you recover.
I'm just picturing that in my head, talking to your wife. Hey, man, want to go play some Scrabble?
It's a fun game, man. Beat your tail. Doing something special, something physical, rather, is another thing. I think I had a long brainstorm here, didn't I?
Yeah, it looks like it, dude.
I really kind of did. Because I had a lot to think about. It didn't take me that long, too. I just realizing as I'm going down through this, like, am I overwhelming people? Is this too much? Like, do we have to take notes? Is this a lecture?
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Seriously, man.
Hey, man, so if people are having trouble, we've talked about trauma in different fashions. I think this is the first time we've talked about sexual trauma. If people have experienced that and they're having trouble in their relationship now, can you get past it? I mean, can you get to a point where you have a healthy, enjoyable sex life with your spouse or your partner, even if you've experienced that kind of trauma in the past?
You know what somebody told me recently? And they've gotten very well. And they made a very important statement. Respect it and honor it, and I think it is really cool. You begin to develop a little bit of a realization that, you know what? This trauma, this person, this event has had power over me for a long time in my life. And by God, you know what? It's not happening now. Get a little pissed off with it. That's fine, because you know what? That doesn't get to have power over me anymore. So the answer to that is an absolute resounding, you know what? Yes, absolutely. This does not have to control your life in any way than it already has up until now. And you begin to recover. You begin to reconstitute an understanding of yourself, feeling comfortable in your own skin and not allowing that to own out your sex life. Yes, absolutely. But remember that statement I kind of said last time. If you don't address it, it doesn't get better. That's the thing that sucks about this. It doesn't just go
but that's
away.
what I'm saying is if you don't address, if you address it in the way you're talking about here, you can get over it.
Absolutely.
You can get past it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of hope with this.
That's good news, right?
It really is, and I'm glad that you did that. Because, this can feel pretty desperate. Trauma sucks. And you feel so out of control. Imagine that. You're literally just absolutely going to your kid's backyard and playing in the sandbox, and this feeling of sand on your body when you fall into the sandbox triggers you into rolling around in the salty desert. That's terrible. I'm just sitting here in my freaking kid's sandbox and I re-experienced this. It's it can feel so overwhelming and so frustrating. But when you get well and you get through that and you deal with those triggers, they don't trigger you anymore, or at least at minimum, very mildly, because sometimes you can't unsee what you see. But yeah, you can absolutely get into a better space with that. Let's finish this up on the other side. Take a quick break. Take a quick break for our sponsoring agency. Who are they, Mr. Graves?
BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com.
And what do they do?
Oh, man, you put me on the spot.
I know, man. What do they do?
It's an online therapy site.
That's right.
So you can go to that site and you can find a therapist that you can communicate with via telephone. Is that right, Chris?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's a service that you can, in these days of COVID and staying at home and social distancing, you can get therapy from the comfort of your own home.
And how do they find it?
BetterHelp.com.
No, through therapisteyes.com. They're a sponsor of ours, and
I'm sorry. That's right. You click through to the there's a counseling link on our website, right?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And that definitely is a way to help us support the show in our partnership with BetterHelp, and keeps the show free for all. Check it out on throughatherapisteyes.com. Let's get back to the show. So, where did I leave off? Resting after a conversation. Self-care relates to relationship care. Doing something physical. Let's park here for a minute. Think back. You remember, Craig, think back to last show and shows before when we really talked about trauma and what's happening with the body, right? You know a little bit about this now. What's your body going through? How do you know you're freaking out with this?
I don't remember if we talked about it specifically, but I would think that your breathing gets shallow, you probably tense up and feel constricted and just really in a bad spot, kind of like a panic attack feeling probably is what you would experience if you're going through this.
You've been doing this show for 2 years. You know more than you think you know. Absolutely dead on, man. It's your body. Think about it as a natural reaction that your body is like, working to survive. Your body has said, all right, you're either going to be killed or kill. You're going to run or you're going to fight. You're going to fight or flight. Your amygdala, right? Your body is doing something that you need to allow it to do. And so doing something physical, particularly after a panic flash or something like that, go for a walk. Or when you're wanting to talk to your spouse and you set something up, do it on a hike. Do something physical, because your body, is. I'll tell you what. I remember something I'll use as an example from personal experience. I had a lot of trouble growing up as a kid, divorced family and some different things, and so I was really struggling with a particular. Actually, I might have had a fight with my wife, to be honest with you. And we were in college, and I remember my roommate at the time. It was Dorothy, and Dorothy. I don't know. She just intuitively figured it out. And she looked at me, and I was having a hard time. I was struggling. And she said, "Come here, Chris. Let's go." And I said, "What?" She said, "Get your shoes on. Let's go." I said, "Oh, okay, whatever." Got my shoes on, and we started walking. And I was walking fast, man. I was paced and hard and walking. And she was just listening. And I was just talking, and she was listening, and I was talking. And she just knew, like, get him up and move. Let's go move somewhere. And I really thought back on that. It just flashed in my mind and memory, when I'm talking about do something physical. That was really helpful, Craig. I really appreciate, if you're listening out there, I really appreciate that day. That was really a helpful thing for me at the time. So that's something that's important, because my body wanted to do something. You know what an awesome treatment for PTSD would be?
Probably a physical activity.
A punching bag.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
You like to work out and do weights and stuff?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How much iron do you pump when you're fired up about something?
I'm not sure if it's any more than I pump otherwise.
Oh, really? I might put a couple extra pounds on there and just work a little harder.
I do believe that, though. The physical activity does help. Helps the brain. Movement helps the brain. I just posted an article the other day about study done at Stanford that says that if you have some kind of writer's block or creativity block, then you can take a walk.
Yeah.
And it will actually get the creative juices flowing. There's research behind it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, look it up on LinkedIn. I posted it the other day.
So what you're saying is when I'm writing my next chapter, I need to go for a walk.
You're stuck? You could, yeah. Get up and go for a walk.
I need to get up for a walk before I start sometimes, what it seems like, All right, this is the last one of my brainstorm. You're going to laugh, Craig. Don't take this wrong, listening audience, man. Be a support animal. What do you think I mean by that?
Be a dog, man. Dog's a man's best friend.
Seriously, if you think about it, a dog being, we've done support animals before, and I'm actually thinking about taking my dog into my office, man. I've really wanted to do that.
Really?
Yeah, man, because she would be great with
you can take Lily
my
in.
clients. Oh God.
my dog hates Chris.
I don't know why. I want to be Lily's friend, man.
She raises the roof when Chris comes in the house.
Every single time, incessantly, doesn't stop. No, seriously, a dog emulates this, all of these things in a great way. Cats are great, animals are great as well. Trish wouldn't think cats are great therapy animals, would she?
No, she wouldn't. I hope she does that book, man. I think that's a winner.
I think so too, yeah.
I think it'd have crap content. Just that title would sell 1 million copies.
It really would. It really would. They're patient. They're accepting. They're unconditional. You can say anything around them. You can be silent with them. They're excited when you come home and you're around. I mean, they really, like, seriously, if we model the way that our pet animals treat us, you're probably going to be in a good zone, right?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Except for Lily.
If people treated other human beings the way they treat their animals, it would be a better world.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
man.
a good point, too, in reverse. So I backed myself up a little bit with an article. I don't know what I need to do with this. Did I want to add stuff? I guess, kind of looking at some stuff further. This is a good article. It's going to be on our show notes. Neil will get that up for you. And it came from helpguide.org. And I thought it was cool because there were several blogs and stuff. But what's funny, man? I don't know if this is a correct statement or not, but I don't think there was a whole lot really at a glance. That's all I do is a glance with that. But on a glance, there weren't a lot of really good, like Psychology Today and, these get well professional sites kind of things that really dealt with from a spouse's perspective. Like, maybe it's a good plug here to kind of say,
if they're not out there, dude, that's the hole you should fill.
I think so.
It's a great opportunity for you to write some information and put it out there.
Probably so. And the plug that I would say is if you happen to come across, you follow our show and you know somebody that that has someone they know about that is dealing with something, friends talk and share basics, pop them a copy of the show, because I don't really think there's a lot out there for them from this angle, from a loved one in a family perspective, But there was this article. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Yeah. Helpguide.org, they kind of talked about provide social support. Actually, I talked about this in some of my ramblings, I guess. Don't pressure into talking. Do normal things, quote unquote. Be patient, accept, and expect mixed feelings. I think with that, yeah, that's what I did with this. Some stuff that I kind of missed in my brainstorm that they kind of, added. I put this out here for myself to remember to go at, to be mindful. Being patient, we talked about. Don't pressure into talking, we talked about. But accepting and expecting mixed feelings, somebody's going to be like, all right, yeah, I'll let you know what. Never mind. I'm fine. No, you're not fine. I'm fine. No, you were just going to tell. No, I'm not. Right? This is going to be herky-jerky, man. This is messy. This is not very simplistic for somebody to be talking about and dealing with this. In fact, that's the last thing that's ever been on their mind for the last 35 years. And now you expect me to deal with it? No. You ever hear the expression, I'll take this to my grave?
Yeah, I've heard that expression.
Right?
Yeah.
Trauma? I'd love to find a research study somewhere and find out how many times that relates to trauma. And I think that's probably going to be pretty stout numbers on that, unfortunately. Hopefully we're blowing that up. So be a good listener. They made the point that I missed in my brainstorm. You know what? This person might be telling you for the 75th time what happened when they went through something that they went through when they went through it. And Craig, that is okay. They're going to retell and retell and retell. And you know what's happening every time they retell? They're re-experiencing and redefining and re-understanding their story. The more that you tell a story, the more that you tell your thing, particularly if you have an abandonment person who's dealing with a trauma, they're going to talk. They're going to talk, and they're going to talk. They're going to talk longer and longer than you ever thought they would ever talk about it before, because maybe it just needs to come out. And that's okay. So it's funny. Don't pressure them to talk, but let them talk as much as they want. It's okay. Over and over again. So I thought that was interesting that they pointed out. Here's another thing. I did mention this as well. This stuff might make you squirmy. You might want to defend them. You mean to tell me your uncle did that when you were out of the house? I'm going to go over there to his house. I'm going to tell him a piece of my mind.
Do more than that.
Kick his ass.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
And, be careful with that because, they need, who's in control?
You are. They are.
They are.
They are.
They are.
You better be in control of yourself, though.
That's right. Right? You need to control yourself because sometimes this is hard to listen to. I mean, I'll be honest with you. In therapy, sometimes I'm hearing some trauma and stuff, and I'm sitting here thinking, dude, I like to take that guy out.
Yeah, those kind of thoughts bring up another scene in Pulp Fiction.
Oh, my God. Which one is that, Mr. Graves?
That's when old Marcellus says he's going to go get some, what does he say? I can't remember the exact quote.
Can of whoop ass. That's not it.
He's going to go get some hard pipe hitting to go to work on the homes with something in a blowtorch.
Now I gotta remember that. I wouldn't be able to recall it, but
yeah,
pretty serious. Yeah, it's going to be hard to listen to sometimes and make you feel squirmy.
Spend the rest of his short ass life in agonizing pain.
Oh man! Whoa, baby, control yourself. They talked about avoiding and getting into a lot of pitfalls. I like this because it models after my book, right? Do's and don'ts, trying to make things simple. Don't give easy answers, right? Don't stop them from talking about their feelings or fears. Don't offer unsolicited advice. Don't tell them what they should do. Don't blame them for their relationship or family problems on their PTSD. Again, weaponized, right? Don't minimize or deny the experience. Don't give ultimatums or make threats or demands or make them feel weak. Pointing out their faults. Don't tell them that they were lucky that it wasn't worse, Don't overshare your own personal experiences or feelings. The trauma, again, is not about you. Those kind of sound a little bit silly if you heard me read through those, right? Kind of like, yeah, well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Why I'm going to blame them? I wouldn't do that. You know what? When you're in real life and you're just kind of having pizza and on a Wednesday night because you didn't feel like cooking and something comes up and you start talking and something starts coming out, it is real easy to minimize what the hell they're trying to talk about. Because I'm just wanting to watch Big Brother. I don't know what you're talking about right now. It's easy to fall into these things, Well, I know what you should do. I got an idea. Hey, have you ever thought that, I don't want to hear that if I'm telling you what I've been dealing with for 35 years inside my personal experience. Don't tell me what to do. You have no idea. You can get some real bits of anger being shot at you when you try some of these things or when you fall into the trap of doing some of these things. And probably, by the way, if you're a loved one dealing with this, I'm sure that you've done these things. It's okay. You want to be aware as possible. Boy, it's really difficult to do this, but they point out rebuilding trust and safety. This is why I almost said earlier, Craig, right? Like, it is almost probably smart to mandatorily think at some point in your professional help with trauma that you do marital counseling. Can I make that statement?
Say it again.
It is probably almost a foregone conclusion, a bit of a requirement. Expect the tendency that if you're engaging in trauma recovery, professional trauma work, that you probably ought to incorporate at some point marriage counseling in that.
So that goes back to what we talked about earlier when I asked you about getting professional
Yeah, it does.
help.
It does. I think so.
Okay.
Because the relationship stuff. I mean, to rebuild trust and to rebuild, safety and again, remember my trauma rules. It's a lot easier for me to tell somebody, hey, listen, you can say whatever you want to say here. And that's what makes an artificial environment such as therapy work. And it is an artificial environment because the real environment is, you tell me this, and I'm going to use it against you. Wait a minute, I didn't mean to. Of course I'm not going to use this against you. Well, you know what? Argument a month later, you did. You brought it up. Why are you throwing that at me now? Right? It's easy trap to fall into. And the person doesn't mean to, but boy, I mean, it's just your own emotions are involved. And when your own emotions are involved, you're probably not making the best decisions sometimes on how to handle something. Oh boy. You want to go to D? How do you deal with this?
Anticipate and manage triggers. You got to realize they're happening. You got to redirect those emotions, man.
It is a really difficult thing because actually I meant for you to read E. When you got the triggers that are happening.
Well, I think it's both the same way.
It is.
You gotta go back to your breath, and you gotta realize what's getting ready to happen. You gotta realize you're getting triggered or getting angry or getting volatile, whatever.
Right.
And then you redirect those emotions to somewhere else.
I just heard the unbeatable mind in that, brother.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. I was just talking with some folks today about this very topic.
Yeah?
Yeah, transmuting emotions and the recapitulation. But yeah, you transmute those emotions. You take anger and transmute it into the equivalent or the exact opposite, which might be compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can deal with that. It's hard. It takes work. You don't learn how to do that overnight, but it is doable.
I think it's funny when the coaching stuff just pops out of you.
Yeah, well, that's what that is, man.
Uh-huh. What I was thinking of when I asked you to look at D is actually E. Yeah, it is. People do not like dealing with anger. They're afraid. I don't want to piss my partner off. I really don't want to piss my partner off. I don't want the volatility. I don't want the irritability. We're just going to leave this lying dog lie.
Yeah. So you do have to have those difficult conversations, and that's one of the things that is the hardest to do. There seems like to be never a good time to talk about something like that that's going to bring out emotions and it could be a difficult conversation, but you got to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you meant with. I think E for you was deal with the volatility and anger that could arise.
Right.
And my thought process in the beginning right there was it has already risen, but I do think you owe it to yourself and that person to have that difficult conversation, whether or not there's volatility or anger that could result or not.
Yeah.
You gotta have that and be honest.
I think what the writers of this, helpguide.org deal kind of maybe have meant was, in handling the anger and the volatility and the irritability that somebody dealing with trauma is going to have, is in part dealing with what I was talking about with, don't personalize this. This anger is not really directed at you. It's directed at my first husband who punched me in the face. Right? A domestic violence victim might be experiencing.
Yeah, but I think there's that may be true, but there's some awareness too on that person's part to realize that.
Oh yeah, of course. That's part of treatment.
Yeah.
Part of you're responsible still if you're being mean to me. I wasn't your first spouse.
And most people aren't aware of that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just pissed off and angry, and they don't know why or have any idea why.
Exactly. That's the thing that drives me nuts with the realities that people have such intense emotional experiences going on, and it just kind of blows my brain sometimes that they just haven't connected that. I mean, they're not. People aren't walking around aware of how they're even feeling, let alone why they're feeling that and what's going on with them. They're not aware.
Yeah, what was the quote that Trish said?
I love it, and I use it. I use it.
What is it?
Struggle with it. I'm curious if you can
I
recall
can't.
it.
It's something about the emotions or signals to her that something's going on. Or
Absolutely.
she needs to change something. Or,
That's right. Emotions are points of information.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, emotions are points of information.
Is this information that I need to do something with, or is this information that I just need to let float away?
Yeah.
And sit with the emotion because it will ride.
Yeah, and going back to D, if you anticipate and manage triggers, right? If something continually triggers you, the same event continually triggers you, there could be something there that needs to be explored too, right?
Mm-hmm.
If whatever it is.
Yeah, that's when you might not even know that the trauma was there. It might even be repressed.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why mindfulness is so important. Just as a mental health reality, right? Like, pay attention.
Yeah.
Why am I feeling?
Yeah,
this
your kid
way?
spills his milk on the table and you lose your mind. There could be maybe when you were a kid,
You know?
spilled your milk and your father backhanded you or something.
Right.
And that's why you
begin to experience that again, and which is an interesting point that we stumbled upon, Craig. Unaddressed trauma oftentimes can be reconstituted as traumatizing other people.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that sucks, but that's a bit of a reality.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I mean, one of the things that we kind of understand in the psychological realm, if you come across sexual abuse, one of the things that happens in families' systems with that kind of trauma is that we don't talk about it. It didn't happen.
Yes, and those things, if you're sexually abused as a kid, you're more likely to sexually abuse somebody else, right? I mean,
Exactly.
that travels down the path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm looking around for any other sexual traumas.
Yeah. I knew a family like that this was many years ago, but one of the stepbrothers who was older molested one of the younger stepbrothers, and it turns out that kid was molested by somebody
Exactly.
who had been molested by somebody,
and on it goes.
Yeah, so it just kind of was going down the line,
Mm-hmm. It's true, and it's super sad, that's because a family rule gets kind of created. We talked about that with alcohol and substance abuse families. A no-talk rule really gets laid pretty thick, and you're not supposed to break that rule. Family members will inadvertently, sometimes unknowingly, hey, we don't talk about that. That's you're fine. You're gonna move along, and it doesn't get addressed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like this was, man, I just feel like I laid a lot of information out, man. I mean, even my show notes were super long this time and everything. I don't know, was that a lot of information, or?
It was a lot. I think if somebody's faced with this situation, they might have to go back and listen to the show more than once, take it in. I do that a lot with stuff because it was definitely a lot of information, and I would encourage you to write some articles and put them out there on Psychology Today and places like that, because if there's a hole for this kind of information, you could certainly fill it.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a challenge. I just got a panic attack.
Maybe there's some trauma you need to deal with, Chris.
Writing my first book. Oh my gosh. I do agree with that, Craig. I think if you know somebody, if you're dealing with this yourself, first of all, get help. Craig's right to highlight that as an important fast point there. Don't do this alone, but to reiterate in simple terms that you asked me last show, what do you do with this? The first thing really is kind of telling your story and not to be alone, and then you get to redefine your story, because by golly, when you've gone through something that's traumatic, it doesn't, if it's not happening now, we don't want it to own you anymore. We don't want it to own your behavior. We don't want it to own your emotions. Let's get that addressed, because the other side of that is absolutely hopeful. I loved when you asked that question a little while ago. Can you have a healthy sex life? Can you have a healthy relationship? Can you feel calm parenting? You know what? Yes, and yes. It's absolutely, I see it happen, and it's awesome to be a part of that with anybody that I've worked with. Gosh, I guess closing thoughts, Mr. Graves. Anything else that we've missed? Thinking about? Yeah.
No, I don't have any closing thoughts, man. I'm still taking it all in. I'll just make the point I made on the last show. If you do feel like you need some help, you can get it right out of the comfort of your own home. Go to our website and click on that counseling link. You can hook up with BetterHelp, and that's all done over teletherapy, right?
It is, and guys, please, that's not a plug. That's really true, and it's a great way to start. It is easier, to be able to do it that way, and I like that you make that point. It's not a plug. It's reach out. Just reach out. If it's a pastor, if it's a friend, somewhere where you feel safe, find a safe space and drop it. They can handle it. It'll be okay. You're not gonna do harm. It's your emotion. It's not that other person's emotion. So reach out is the main point here. Neil had talked about we might have what did he say? Do we want to? Well, we're not going to plug that yet.
Nah.
Yeah, the next show. Okay, guys, we're glad you're listening. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope it's been helpful. We love doing the show. Share this one for sure with anybody dealing with trauma in their family systems and whatnot. Make it a great week, and we'll see you soon.